Okay, I think I'll start. Okay, welcome to today's webinar on clinical trials and strategy, turbo boosting adoption and approval. My name is Gabriel. I'm the Director for Strategic Partnership at APACMed. So I'll give a little bit of an introduction about APACMed before we move on to the webinar proper. For benefits of the rest who may not be familiar with who APACMed is and what we do. So APACMed is short for the Asia Pacific Medical Technology Association. We are a not-for-profit medical technology association covering medical device diagnostics as well as digital health. So we are set up by the industry, including global companies like J&J, Medtronic, Covidien back then, Abbott, Stryker, and B. Bronze, who started this association. And over the last 5 years, we've grown the membership from 9 back then to about 100 and close to about 170 members right now. And one thing I want to share about the membership base is that out of the close to 170 members, almost 70 of them are startups who cuts across the different domains that I mentioned across medical device diagnostics and digital health, and also across the Asia Pacific region, including we have startups from Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, and of course some of the other countries across the region like Philippines as well. Yeah, so because we have a growing number of startups that are joining us, this year we've decided to introduce a program called the Founder Series. The Founder Series is aimed to support startups through a few platforms. The first is through the Founders Campus, which is an educational platform like what we are doing today, where we will bring in senior business leaders across the industries to discuss topics that are relevant for the startups. So this is very much an education platform that we are providing for our startups. The second platform is that a collaborate platform where we are looking at how we can reach startups with global companies so that together they can explore potential partnerships in terms of co-product development, in terms of licensing, or even go-to-market strategy. So that's the second platform. And the third platform is a Founder Circus platform where we give our startups access to mentors from our senior business leaders in the industries, as well as advisors, and also access to investors as well. So the purpose of this program is really to ensure that our startups are plugged into the ecosystem that we are building. We have programs to support them to scale up, and eventually, as an industry, we can grow and thrive together. So I'm really thankful that today we're organizing this webinar, and we have the support of senior business leaders who will deliver a program today on clinical trials. And I just want to briefly introduce them before I hand them over to them. So today we have Dr. Karen Y. Karen is a medical doctor, and she's also the managing director of WK Advisory. So Karen has, spent 13, 14 years with the then Quintiles IMS. I'm sure today we have many IQVIA folks on board as well. And very importantly, in her last few years, she has supported various MedTech startups, including Bioform is a very prominent startup in Singapore and the region. So we are really delighted to have her to, share with us more from the clinical trial strategy, and then we will move on to Nelson, who will focus more on the execution. Nelson is the director for CSI Medical Research, and he started his career in the clinical research space with Singapore General Hospital. And also he spent many years as general manager at the then Quintiles IMS, and in the course of his work at CSI Medical Research, he has also supported many startups in the area of clinical trials. So those are two of our key speakers today. And today what we want to do something a little bit differently. And thanks to Karen and Nelson for suggesting this. We have invited a startup, Kavev from Curative. So Kavev is the co-founder and the CTO of Curative. And we want to use this opportunity to really make it practical for all our attendees today. And we'll do an exercise around curative product, and especially to look at how we can devise a clinical strategy and an execution plan. So with that, I'll hand you to Dr. Karen Wai, who will, lead us through the clinical trial strategy. Karen, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Gabriel. And thanks to you and APACMed for inviting Nelson and myself to this. So I'm very excited. Good afternoon to those who have joined us. I see about 35 individuals. And really, we're trying to get to more the practical side. I think strategy is quite a big word that one uses, but really trying to hone down so that you don't get scared of it. Now, I'm sharing my screen right now so they can delve into it. Everyone can see?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Cool. So I think mainly where we're going to go with this is very much. How I'm going to break it up over the next couple of minutes is very much time, the cost of it, right? The main reasons for the delay, and they might not look like strategic items, but really at the end of the day, when you're designing a clinical trial, this exactly what it is. Yeah? So if I ask all the founders up there, how many times have you been sitting in front of your PowerPoint, your Excel spreadsheet, really trying to figure out the timelines that one will need for the clinical trials alongside whatever else that you need to budget for it? And I think it's quite a difficult one. I'm pretty sure you go to CROs and they give you varying numbers, but it really comes down to your clinical trial strategy. And these numbers here are from someone who did the sort of analysis on the FDA pivotal trial. And honestly, it takes about 3 years, median time 3 years, right, for a duration of a pivotal trial. Okay, you have your outliers, some do it in 3 months, some do it in 7 years, which is a very long time for MedTech. But in all fairness, when you actually do it, 3 years is what you're looking for, because there are a lot of considerations, and that also will go through some of it that some of you might have thought of, some of you might not have thought of when you get into this aspect of your development. 5 years is what it takes to FDA approval from the time you start your pivotal clinical trial. Okay, so these are quite huge numbers. And I think most of you, I'm hoping that are going into MedTech already understand it's a long development process. Unfortunately, I have still seen people who are really, really optimistic that they can actually finish a clinical trial in 6 months. Okay, I myself, in all my years working in quintals for practically every single pharmaceutical company, as well as MedTech big ones up there, have never finished anything shorter than 8 months, and that 8 months for 11 patients, and we use Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so I'm just saying that you will hear stories. It's not really realistic. You're looking at years. Okay, you can break that onto months, right? 336 months for it, but that's what you're actually looking for. So the first thing to understand when you're doing a turbo boosting, which is what we say in terms of all of these, it's really doing your right financial sum as well as the timelines that actually go with it. Because essentially without that, you will be either chasing for the next funding round before you even start or complete your clinical trial, or you'll be running out of runway or patience of your investment. It's a bit buggy, this system. So now, firstly, the 3 years is there, but there are other things that can occur that might delay you. And as part of your whole strategy, you have to try and get around all of these. There are some things that you really cannot foresee, COVID being one of them. I think most of you who are running clinical trials at least 6 months behind time already at this stage, there will be more delays. There are things like IRB approvals, can't guarantee that no matter how good your protocol might be. Okay, your PI decides not to do it anymore, you can't really help that. But there are certain things that you can. And I think some of the key delays always surround the design of your clinical trial as well as the patient. Okay, I'm really, really pro-patient, and I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those that really can make or break your sort of like clinical trial. So at the end of the day, this is where there's so many reasons. Okay, you have to do your risk analysis in terms of what one needs to do, places that you need to go. But I want to concentrate on both the patient as well as the clinical trial. And this is from the late Clayton Christensen, and it's really, really true when one looks out there in terms of where the money is for this. But I must say things are really changing with value-based healthcare. And in a lot of times when you actually, in general, you should be able to get your 510K, okay, if you're going for that easily enough, right? It is a simple class 2 sort of like device. But when you actually go there to go and find people who actually pay for it, you will find that you really need to go and look at the patient adherence improvements. And that's where it's really key. You know, when all of you build your product, is not only adhere to the principle of patient-centric design in your product itself, but also the patient-centric design in your clinical trials. Because essentially all has to tie together, because without this getting to the right angle, it's harder to actually change the value-based healthcare when the time comes. So what exactly do I mean by the patient-centric design? And it's not something that I coined out myself. The FDA late last year, they did release a draft guidance document, really trying to cement it and to define this whole entire area. And they're looking for patient engagement early on in the clinical design process of the MedTech itself. And, you know, you can see a lot of words over there, and that's the official definition. Essentially what it is, it's not you going out there to have small little coffee mornings with your patient advocacy groups, okay, and bring back sort of like, you know, ad hoc sort of like feedback. It's really a systematic way for you to go to the right patient population that you're actually targeting and get the flow of information that's informative to the bill. So the other thing that they do define are patient advisors. And these are not trying to distinguish, they're not really your KOLs, which we have used traditionally in the past to try and get a, you know, an idea of what the patients would need, right? And they do give you that clinical aspect of it, but these are people who experience and have the particular disease. You bring them in as advisors to actually help you, guide you along this clinical strategy that you are building for your product. Okay? They have to be separate from the volunteers or patients that you're going to recruit in the clinical trial. So the very, very specific paid services for this individual. The guidance is in draft. I suspect once it comes into fruition, sort of like, I would say as part of your clinical strategy, when you actually submit to the FDA, you will have to show evidence if it's doable that you have actually tapped into a whole patient advisory group to actually guide you along this way. It's not there yet, so I have to caveat this, and this was draft guidance, but to me, it is going in the right direction. Okay, so where do you bring them in? You can bring them in anywhere, both at the pilot, at the pivotal, the post-marketing sort of type thing, okay, because you're really trying to get insight. Now, I know some of the founders have come from a background where they were patients themselves, so all well and good. But understand as you go along the design process of a particular product, you get merit to it. So this is where you meet that objective. And like with all clinical trials, it's a small subset you get. So the more patient advisors you get to give you a more diverse subset, gives you more understanding of what it is when you actually get out there after approval. Now, so from the patient, let's go a bit into the clinical study design. Okay, can't delve too deeply into it, but the 4 key areas, the 3 main areas of the design itself, and one more, I just wanted to do a more practical one, is, you know, it starts with the objective. Okay, ultimately, you're going for superiority or non-superiority. Okay, and so it's the, if I could, it's sort of like the mousetrap. Is it the better one, or is it the cheaper one? Okay, and why I say this is everyone tries to go for superior, but sometimes it's non-inferior, but then you have a better process that you have, you can do it better, cheaper, sort of like thing. So by all means, you should be able to go for that component of it. As long as your objective is clear, I think where I have again seen people coming and not placing that in a way, right? Because sometimes you can't actually, at the end of your clinical trial, you might not be able to show superiority. It happens, and that's the whole point of where you actually do the clinical trial. But of course, if you did manage to show it, then you get it as part of your claims, right? So some people then take the thing, do they go for equivalence? If they do, so it is a balance. Okay, no clinical trial will always will be 100% positive to what you want it to be at the end of the day. Again, when I was sitting in the CRO seat, you have a lot of people coming in, no, I need it guaranteed. No, there's no such thing. That is the whole point of doing the clinical trial. And I think for those of you who are maybe trying to manage investors who are not so clear in this portion, it's the key is that there is no guaranteed outcome from it. It's slightly more, not slightly more, but it's the easier way to try and get it from a medical device perspective, okay? But for pharmaceuticals, for sure, it's never a guaranteed outcome. And I think once you have your objective, you really need to clear your endpoints, yeah? And again, clear, precise, what you want it to be, clinically relevant, please. I've seen endpoints that become primary endpoints that are really not clinically relevant, but people want to capture it for the sake of capturing it. The more endpoints you have, the higher chance of something going wrong in a clinical trial, from non-adherence to your patient, not enough data, you can't do a data lock, you can't finish a clinical trial, right? So the endpoints, keep it short and simple to what your objective is, okay? One clinical trial occasionally cannot contain everything that you have. So in your strategy, you really have to look realistically what can be done within one construct of a clinical trial. You might need multiple trials to actually get the pivotal stage of it, and I think that has happened. But to think of it upfront and to map it out as one goes along. The other thing is control versus not, as always, try and have it controlled. Again, goes back to your objective, right? Whether you're superior or non-inferior, okay? Controlling, you are looking at devices. No device, not particularly possible in some instances. You know, you could do it against another device. Standard of care is really what's out there, depending on the industry, just sort of like the area that you're looking at. And of course, the golden one is the randomization, and it's difficult from the MedTech point of view, but something that can be achieved if you look at it correctly. Now, the more practical part of it is actually the consult, okay? And consult not only literature, but go and talk to your regulators from it. I see a lot now. Okay, don't go to talk to your regulators before you do a comprehensive literature search, right? And I'll give you an example. The second case study, the first and the second are very much around it. You can get a lot of information out there, but you need to know how to read clinical papers, okay? And you need to go and search for things that will give you an idea of whether a clinical study design can be implemented or not in the particular area that you're actually looking at. And once you actually do that, you can go and talk to your regulators. Of course, if you're going for a novel one, novel device, for sure, that's the first thing that you do before you embark on the fully sort of like fledged trial. Okay. Now, let me go into the case studies. Two that I'm going to bring up, and then I want to bring in Javier, so we spend a bit of time with him, just like discussing his dilemma, just to make it real out there. The first one I'm going to talk about is very much CardioMEMS. The reason why I brought this particular case study up, for those of you who are chasing your class 3, right, class 2 and above, this is a very, very good case study for this, because of the way they actually designed the clinical trial, and now the post-marketing and what they need to do after that. And also, you can get a lot of the information online. It's not behind any secure NDA or anything, and you get a lot of perspective. So key thing about this is a wireless sensor, okay? Used for heart failure, they implant it in, and subsequently, whatever changes in the pulmonary artery, the pressure over there is back to the physician. They can change the medication. Okay, so pretty simple. Again, one of those wireless sensing sort of like thing. But the key thing about this, in heart failure, a lot of people are trying multiple trials, okay, to try and show that whatever they have works. Okay, and prior to this, they were all chasing, mortality and morbidity. Okay, so whether the patient dies or gets something else. All right. The CardioMEMS one was, and they call it the trial champion. And again, and Guy HR is quite cute. It's easy for people to remember. Again, a bit of a marketing ploy as well. When you're trying to sell your clinical trial, you try and name it taxily, because you do have to sell it to your PIs who want to conduct it. So about 560 patients, 6 months in total, when you actually do it per patient. Okay, what they did was very interesting. Their key, the safety endpoints were the same, no death on it and so forth, but the efficacy endpoint, the primary one, was actually hospitalization. Okay, as opposed to chasing all the mortality, mobility, and all those that everyone else had done. That's what they chased, and they showed quite a significant sort of like reduction in hospitalization when they actually did this, which was not something that other people had shown in their particular devices. So kind of that's not the first thing that came up in this particular space, right? Now, you will also read as successful things, there are a lot of, let's say, disagreement in whether this clinical trial truly showed the hospitalization. One of the key reasons being that, if you were in the trial, there was better monitoring anyway, so theoretically everyone would have a better hospital, with the reduction in hospitalization would have come through anyway. And again, one of the key things why you need to read all of these is to understand sort of like, once you put your clinical trial out there, where people look at, so that you can also try and, have come, I guess, depends on some of the ways that your patient can do the trial. Okay. Now, key thing about CardioMEMS, again, if you follow them along the route, the pivotal trial, great, they got their marketing authorization, it was limited, okay? Then after that, now they're going to GUIDE-HF, which is about 3,600 patients, right? 5-year trial finishing in 2023 or something like that. And then with that, this is like they're not really real-world study yet, but this is where they're opening it out, right? Because they do see that they want to increase the pool of potential patients that they're going to use this sensor for. So great case study for those of you who are embarking on that. There's a lot of it online. Have to read through it, debate among yourselves because it's great learning from it. Next one out there, why I say it's easy enough to try and go through, there is a website none of you really know. I used to spend most of my time on clinicaltrials.gov. Okay, you will find a lot of it. Loads of COVID studies out there at this point in time. If any one of you is doing sensor-based vital signs, have a look at those studies out there, because you might be able to use them for your particular submission as well. Okay, if they are generic enough to keep it there. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have to do your own depending on your particular device, but and again, this one was, when I took this one out, it was from Norway. As you can see, they gave you information on how they randomize, the control plus follow, against standard of care, right, active reporting. They had endpoints, stop hospitalization, new score, it also did the patient was when they actually entered the hospital after taking the vital signs. Okay, then they had SAC-free. So again, when you're actually doing your clinical strategy, while it'd be nice to think that you could be innovative, to tell you honestly, after more than 20 years sort of like doing this, a lot of people have thought about all the innovative strategies out there. You just have to look for it and see what best fits you. Okay, and it's not hard to find any of these out there. And when you bring around it, the key thing now, I would guess the new one that one really needs to think of is really the patient perspective. Okay, that is really now, I would say, going to be forefront when you actually build on this. Now, Kevin, I'm just wondering whether you're online with me right now as we delve through this.
Yeah, okay. So thanks, Karen, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kaveh, CTO of Curative. We have been working on AI solutions for cancer for the past few years. And so the problem that I suggested Karen to discuss is basically a clinical study that we have we are actively working with SGH on it. And so let me give you a quick description of the problem. The images shown on the slide are taken after applying a staining chemical on a piece of tissue called Ki67. This biomarker shows the proliferation of cells. So when a cell starts a process of cell division, it expresses a protein that is highlighted in brown by this chemical in the images that you can see. So negative cells are light blue, positive cells are dark brown. The basic idea here is very simple. It is to just count negative and positive cells in a specific region of interest and calculate the percentage of positive cells to the total cells. So the output is going to be just a percentage. Of course, counting cells is impractical because there are hundreds of thousands of cells in each region of interest. And so the output of the pathologist will be a rough percentage score indicating the degree of proliferation. This is a common practice in clinical settings as well. So in our clinical study, asking doctors to count cells for us is not possible. There are millions of cells, so that we don't know the actual number of cells as ground truth. Because of this, we cannot calculate the actual accuracy of the system or the doctors as well. And because we expect the AI to perform better than doctors on this problem, if we assume doctors' outputs are the ground truth, AI's performance will be lower than the doctors, which is misleading. So this is the problem that we are facing. Our plan so far is to measure agreements between our system and doctors and compare it to the agreement between doctors, basically. And if the AI agrees with doctors on average more than the agreement between doctors, then we have a case saying that AI is performing better or as good as doctors. So this was my suggestion to Karen and Gabriel for discussion. So Karen, do you want to continue? If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, thank you. So I think as we were discussing, there are one of the ways to look at this, right? If you take the image on the leftmost side there, that's what your pathologist will actually see, and that's where they make their assumptions. But in all fairness, again, if you do that and just ask them to do an estimation of it, it's really an estimation, right? And as you say yourself, your AI might be better or worse. One never knows from an estimation to an estimation. So, but the thing is from a very practical point of view, is to then take a small section, whereby if you look at the middle picture, is, you know, and just get the doctor and the AI to actually work on that section by itself, right? And then with that is that you know, it's able to give you a sensitivity and specificity. At minimum, you are going to say that you know it's going to be equivalent, right? Now, if you blow that up a bit bigger and blow it bigger, you will get to a stage whereby it's not feasible from a human eye point of view to actually really distinguish. And that's where you see then if you do it in a staggered manner, when it becomes completely impractical from a human point of view and the AI takes over. Once you can show that your AI is more or less is equivalent to the human until the human eyesight cannot distinguish the cells at the individual level, then that is your color point when your AI actually becomes better. Because theoretically, it can't get worse. You know what I mean? You know, and logic by itself will tell you it will be better anyway. So the other thing that you're going to consider is then you just calculate the time, how long it takes a human to actually do it. So in a way, you show superiority in terms of time to diagnosis and identification on the and the same time, at minimum, you will be able to show equivalent in terms of individual cells that one has. Now, in terms of estimation, we could still do that at the very end and then see how it is. But it's you know, you would just do the extrapolation. I think it's more than sufficient in terms of sort of like equivalence at the very start.
All right. Okay. So just a follow-up question. Measuring time for doctors is actually quite difficult because you don't know, I mean, when they're working, how they're working, and whether they are interrupted by other things. So how do you suggest us to measure the time?
I think it has to be like any clinical trial. So there has to be a set time that one actually goes, they have to actually sit down to actually do this. So the way that you run your clinical study is, if let's say it's a 1 by 1 centimeters kind of like block, you will time them from the start that they start to the end of that particular one, right? So they will have to sit there until they finish counting. Okay.
Okay.
And you will have to more than likely compensate them for that time, but you will have to do that. And show as part of it that's why you did, because if you don't, then you as you say yourself, you can't really record the time accurately, and then you can't make any assumptions on top of it or any claim that you will be faster.
All right. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So I think that ends my sort of like part of it, you know, and I'm really happy that Nelson is here to take you through some of the more practical sides of it. While what I will do, if it's okay, Gabriel, I'll take a look at the Q&A because I couldn't get through it while we were on full screen.
No problem.
If anything came through, I will try it.
Yeah. Yeah, so while we are getting the slides on, I think we have a question from Arjun around, okay, his question is clinical trial strategy for in vitro diagnostics assays. So I'm not sure if that's something Karen or Nelson can, take up before we move on to the next part of the webinar.
That's quite a big question. Could you refine it down? I mean, exactly what you're looking for in terms of clinical trials. I think a lot of IVDs you can do sort of like a bench test to actually get it out. Really depends on what IVD you're actually looking at. In terms of, again, coming back to value propositions, you might have to go out there to show the value of it to get paid more for it. But I guess not knowing exactly what specific because IVD is so big, that's that's I guess my top line. So
yeah.
Response.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So do keep your questions coming on the chat feature at the bottom of the Zoom platform. So maybe while the questions are coming in, we'll move on to Nelson, who will take us through the clinical trials operations. Nelson, over to you.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep. Loud
okay.
and clear.
Thanks, Gabriel and APACMed for really inviting me to this platform to share my experience. So I'm actually going into more of a very operational viewpoint for the founders, because my interaction with some of the founders is that they might not have a lot of experience working through the sites, working with the sites, how the study is designed. So from my point of view is that I will actually assist you to actually understand, now that you have a clinical protocol, how do you want to proceed to do this, right? So I'll go on to the next slide. So the typical life cycle of a study, pardon me if you have been in this industry for long, but again, this platform is really for the founders. So bear with me for a moment here. So firstly, you need to understand where do you want to actually place your study. So the country selection is going to be very important. So what are the different things that you actually need to look at when you select a particular site particular country? So it will be based down really on the patient. So if you have a really good design, have a really good motivated site and all that, but there's no patient, your study is going to be failure at the end of the day. So patient is the single most important factor that you should consider when you look at placing trials in particular country or particular site. You might also want to consider the ease of review and the approval of your study. Different countries have different setup in terms of IRB, in terms of their regulations. So you might want to know, get someone local to actually help you understand where is what is roughly the estimated timeline for approval. If you have everything ready, and that's when you have everything ready, like the documents and all the required essential. You also need to understand the enrollment rate. If you have a big pool but you don't have resources to actually enroll, you don't have experience to enroll, that will also be detrimental. The past experience of the clinical study within that country is going to be important as well. And marketing considerations, whether your product is going to sell there, whether there's any competitive devices, any competitive advantage that you want to actually put it out there first. So those are some of the key considerations when you actually think about which country to actually go to. Once you have selected a country, you now go to the exciting prospect of actually selecting the good site. So what are the criteria for actually selecting good sites? Again, it's the patient pool. You selected a country that has good population, but you need to be laser precision to actually really target the right sites that have the patient pool. So it's going to be very detrimental. Investigator experience. If the investigator has a lot of experience in enrolling this study or doing clinical trials, then you're actually having a good start. Site resources. They might your study might need specific equipments, resources, facilities, and all that. So you need to understand whether they have this kind of resources, facilities, and equipment to actually help you run the study. Investigator will not be the person, primary person to drive the study, although they are the ones that are actually providing oversight. But the investigator actually relies a lot on the CRCs to actually find facilities and equipment to actually make sure that the study is a success. Then goes on to regulatory, once you have gathered the sites, you need to compile the dossier, submit to IRB. This, in particular, Singapore, you do not need HSA, so you just have to compile your dossier, submit to IRB. So you need to understand what are the dossiers that, what are the documents within the dossier that you need to actually submit. So by preparing and reviewing the timelines, for just to give you a flavor, Singapore IRBs, depending on different IRBs, they only accept, for the SRB, they accept submissions on the 15th day of every month. For CRB, they accept only on the first working day of every month. And December, they don't have any meetings. So those are the key strategies that you need to actually look at on how to actually submit this. Also knowing that they are, I think I will actually go through in more details in the subsequent slides when regulatory and startup, because that is potentially a risk for all the companies that haven't done any submissions before. So after you've gotten all the approvals, contract has been actually signed off, you'll be initiating the site. So initiating the site is a key milestone for any company doing clinical studies. So that will actually start your patient enrollment. You actually need to actually ensure that the site processes, the data that you collect, there are sufficient resources to actually help you run the studies are actually all there. So it's important that you have someone on the ground to actually run this all for you. Then when all the data has been collected, you need to actually make sure that the data quality is of good integrity. You need to analyze the data, and you need to actually ensure that your study sites are being closed as per the requirements. So those are, there are a lot of administrative, there are a lot of guidelines, regulations that you need to actually follow from all this life cycle. Okay. So just a quick look at what you actually look out for during site selection. Like I said before, patient is very important. The availability of the patient is the single most critical question that you need to ask your site. If you're engaging a CRO, you also need to make sure that the CRO delivers what the patient number that's given to you, because if you are not able to actually enroll the number of patients, you are not able to actually do a very effective analysis of your data. So this is absolutely critical, and this is going to be the single most, very finance heavy kind of decision that you have to make. Next will be the investigator. You need to have a very investigator that buys into your product and is committed to actually develop this science as well. So they need to have experience in doing clinical studies, so that there are lesser things that you can actually worry about in terms of quality and protocol compliance. So doing studies, variation is going to be a nightmare. So you need to have good investigators, good availability resources such as co-investigators, study coordinators, and other collaborators to be there to actually support your study. If you are actually going ahead to talk to an investigator to say that, I can do it alone, I would advise you to think twice, because my experience working with most centers is that investigator alone is not enough. They need study nurse. Because you are not able to actually pull them off from their routine clinical practice, away from their patients, and these are all mostly administrative matters, protocol matters that you need to actually have support from others, right? Local practices. So you need to understand local processes. The last thing you want is that you try to actually implement something on that site or pertaining to the country, and you found out that the country cannot use this kind of devices, or they cannot actually do that. So this is going to be a huge waste of resources and money. IRB as well, need to understand, particular site, what are the IRB used, what are the review timelines, what's the cost, what's the submission requirements. Another key important aspect is the contract and budgets. So in Singapore, I think we are facing some challenges in terms of agreeing to contracts and budgets. But I think things has improved. And if we are able to actually use the templates that the hospitals are actually using, we are going to have a good start. So also try to actually get the estimated budgets and the site-specific costs for your studies to actually understand what are the ballpark, because there might be a lot of you don't want to be too much of a variance of the funds that you actually get from investors, and then the sites actually give you a very high cost. So those are things that you need to manage as well. Regulatory and startup. So for Singapore, if you're talking about Singapore, it's not applicable. But you need to actually apply for the clinical research material, which is also called the import license, to import your medical devices if this is not manufactured in Singapore. The IRBs need to understand the requirements. Like I said, you need to actually make sure that you count backwards on the deadlines for submission. So don't just think that, oh, but if we need to actually submit first working day of the month, I will submit on the 27th on the prior month. That's not going to fly as well, because you need to have the investigator to acknowledge, to endorse. You need to have the department representative to endorse. You have to have the research office sometimes have to come in and actually ask questions as well. Then they will sign off by the institution. So you need to at least give 2 weeks of this process to actually happen before you can really click the submit button to submit into the IRB on the first working day. So those are some of the pitfalls that if you don't have any experience working in this field, you will definitely delay your timelines by another month. So contract and budget negotiations, again, as this is a bottleneck process, I would strongly recommend that you start as early as possible, understand the standard fees, get the budget table template if you can, get a contract template if you can, and then you will actually be able to, cut some time off. Remember that each time when you actually go out for a negotiation, by sending out an email to say, oh, can you confirm this? Usually people will take about 5 to 7 days to come back to you. So because they need to actually have the legal to review, they need to have different stakeholders to actually look at it as well. So those are things that you can actually be in control. Some sites even have very good SOPs in terms of how you're actually going to negotiate budgets and templates. So do look up for that and ask for this kind of SOPs prior to that, so that it can actually save you a lot of hassle. Okay, study initiation and conduct. So again, make sure that you are in control of the enrollment rate. Use of advertisement. I have studies that use Grab, placing advertisement in Grab to actually get patients, which is a very novel use of technology. You can also use social media platforms to actually publish, but again, all this needs IRB approval. You also need to consider what are the clinical pathways of the patients. If you're actually looking at specific timeline that you need to actually apply your medical devices and all. Quality is one of the key areas where I felt that it has been neglected when I talk to a lot of the stakeholders, because they think that, okay, as long as I actually get the data, as long as I can get the patients, I can actually churn out the data, that's okay. But regulators, if you need to actually get it approved, regulators might want to actually come in and say, what is your study conduct oversight? How do you ensure that your study data is actually being is of good integrity? what are the good documentation practices that you actually provide or actually implement in your studies. So those are things that if you cannot actually answer this to the regulators or the IRBs or any auditors at all, your data integrity will be questioned. So those are things that you need to actually ensure that there are proper oversight and control over your quality of the data. Training of your site staff is going to be very important because you have a clinical protocol, and as I said before, any variations will be a big nightmare. So you need to make sure that the site staff are actually being trained, the protocol or the investigators are being trained to actually understand how your protocol is going to collect data, going to consent patients, what are the visits, what are the things that you need to actually do at each visit. So those are things that you need to actually train your staff. You need to train your staff on good documentation practice. If there's any changes, correction, those are a proper way to actually do it with good audit trail as well. And ensure that your sites are really able to actually adequately resource to support this study. This is going to be very, very important. Okay, this is last of my slide. Is that when you actually look collect data, it will be actually loaded in a database. So there will be actually timely data queries being fired, and you need to make sure that all these data queries are being resolved on a timely manner. They need to be adequately source verified, meaning that the data in the database should have been documented in the patient's notes and all that, so we will know where you actually get the data from and not plucked from thin air. The timeline for database lock is going to be important because if you miss that, you will actually impact your downstream processes as well. So after you have actually closed the site, cleaned the data, you need to also make sure that the investigators actually have the obligations to fulfill for GCP and all the ISO. So you need to inform the sites that there will be possible audits and inspection, particularly from all the agencies to come in and check on the data as well. And as per any drug trials, you need to actually also make sure that the documents are archived in accordance with the local regulations as well. Okay, that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Nelson and Karen. I think we have another 10 minutes more, and there are a couple of questions that have been surfaced. I just want to kind of share them. Okay, so one question is, for Class 3 implant first in men pilot trial in Singapore, is an approval for HSA needed or equivalent to IDE in the USA, or approval from IRB for trial is sufficient?
So maybe I can answer that.
Yeah.
So HSA doesn't mandate clinical trials, medical device clinical trials to be regulated. So you only need IRB approval for now.
Okay. Thank you, Nelson. I think we have another question. So, sorry. Yeah, Karen. Yeah, sorry.
I think for Class 3 implant, right, one of the key things is make sure you get the correct insurance. It depends on whether you're sponsored or not sponsored, but insurance is going to be very, very important for this. There are very few, unfortunately, few insurance players, right, Nelson, within Singapore. It can add up to quite a bit, especially when you disclose that it's going to be a Class 3.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. And one question here from Hitesh from Sydney. I'm working on a project involving cloud-based analysis of brain MRIs. How would the clinical trials for this proceed? That's a huge question.
Yeah, we also, it should be depending on your protocol design and all. I mean, I would think that you would need informed consent for patients. Okay, the question is, are you going to do a retrospective or are you going to do a prospective study? So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself. So if this is a prospective study, you need to actually get informed consent from patients. let them share or let them read their MRI scans. So again, it's a very, there are a lot of variations on how you actually want to run the study, but again, we need to understand exactly how you are going to approach to design that, and then we can actually advise you operationally how it's going to be happen. Yeah, Karen.
I would say, yeah, I would support Nelson. Also, it comes down to what your objective is. I think if you are just identifying different artifacts within the brain scan itself, right? The clinical trial is going quite simple. You might not need a full clinical trial, it might just be a comparison basis. But if you're going into full diagnosis of something, then it's a full-fledged clinical trial. As Nat can say, prospectively, firstly, you have to train your AI so you get consent for the data images that you're going to be using, and then subsequently, prospectively, can you actually do it in real time, right? It's kind of like, that's how you distinguish those. So it's not an easy one, but in principle, that's what you're going to get. And I think it might be good if you want to touch base with curators, because I think they're quite far along this process from a computer visioning point of view anyway, and diagnosis.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. We have a question from Patty. Is there a minimum number of patients required for a pivotal trial?
No, in general, they have ranged from 20 to about 100. It really depends on what you are looking at. Is it really at the feasibility stage? If you're looking for statistical significance, it's really not going to be that, right? So, you'll need more. It really depends on the endpoints and the outcomes that one is actually looking at. The ballpark on the cost, I'm going to leave it to Nelson to give a gauge on how much that is. But no, look here, at the end of the day, your pivotal trial is, you should really, if this is your one chance to actually do it, try and get it statistically significant, which means you have to power it, which means they have to go into the hundreds theoretically, right? Based on that, right? Some people have gone down into the lower end. It's not sufficient power. Most people won't get any significant when you go out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Karen. Importantly, I think you need to get a biostats person to actually look at what your objective is, and they will actually be the best person to actually help you come up with a number. Operationally, I think we rely on biostatisticians to actually really look at how you come up with the power, what is your objective, what is your endpoint, and then they will be able to actually work out what are they will also do literature research to actually understand how are you going to actually reach your endpoints. So those are some of the things that they can advise, I would say. But in terms of cost, it's really tied to how many patients, what are the countries that you want to go, and it varies differently where you want to place your studies. So again, this is very, very specific questions. You need to have a specific key points for us to actually advise you.
Yeah, we have a question around PDPA. So PDPA is Singapore's Personal Data Protection Act. How is this relevant to clinical trials, and what are the additional issues to be addressed to abide by PDPA?
Usually the informed consent that you send to all the major hospitals, they will have specific clauses in PDPA that you will need to adhere to. So they have a standard language. If you go to CRRB, if you go to DSRB, if you look at the ICF templates from them, they will already have put in all the languages for PDPA. So the patients, once they actually sign the informed consent, basically they will, and I cannot say for all, but basically all the elements of the PDPA are actually listed in the IRB's template. You can actually go in and have a look at it.
Yeah, so I think we have a number of questions that are coming in. If we can't address all the questions, please feel free to direct them to me, and then I can reach out to Karen and Nelson. We have 4 minutes remaining. I just want to get Karen's and Nelson's thought around, if there's one thing that you want the startups and the founders to take away from today's session, what would that be?
Ladies first.
I think for me, it's really budgeting the time, right, and the right amount for it. I think, as Nelson said, sometimes it's difficult to get the right money amount, but you are talking about at least 5 zeros behind most of these clinical trials, especially with your pivotal trial. And I think the time you really see in 3-5 years, okay, that's what you're actually looking at. You really can't do it faster than that. It's not that we might just do a class one. Okay, I'm not being flippant, but I think it's really key. If you don't actually budget the time and the money for it, you ain't going to get very far with your clinical trial. If I could just add one more, Gabriel, I am part of a charity, Mentor for Hope. We are doing mentoring sessions for founders who are affected by COVID. If you want, they're really cheap. All proceeds go to charities. So if you do reach out to me, if that's okay, I'm really going to put you through it so that we can get stuff. Yeah, but do reach out to me.
For me, I think it's a sound, a development plan for your protocol, and the rest, I think, you need to actually make sure that you understand, or you seek a partner to actually understand what's the ground, what are the sites that are available, what are the potential pitfalls that you might face, and I think that will actually save you a lot of cost in terms of rather than just running a big round. You will be able to actually save a lot of time. Time is of essence in clinical trials. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think this is really, clinical trials is really a very important topic, because I think, from what I'm understanding today, it has implications on cost, it has implications on investment, it has implication on commercialization. And I want to thank, Karen and Nelson for walking us through the journey today around clinical trial strategy and, of course, the execution of it. And for all of us here, who may have additional questions that you want to raise, please feel free to direct them to me, and I'm happy to connect you with Karen and Nelson separately, because I see a number of questions around costs and stuff like that, and I think it's a bit difficult to address in general terms without having to understand the background. So please feel free to direct your questions to me, and I will connect you with Karen and Nelson. And with this, I want to thank all of you for attending the Founder Series webinar, and we look forward to having you 2 weeks from now, where we will look at a topic around intellectual property. So meanwhile, please take care and have a good rest of the week. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you everyone.
Yeah.